Hey everyone, happy Friday. Thank you so much for signing up for this workshop through Nest. It's not me, it's you, which is our new COVID themed weekly workshop where we're talking about roommate dynamics and interpersonal dynamics that might change or shift as coronavirus has changed, as we've been forced inside, as we've been forced to spend so much more time with the people that we live with. And this is going to be a simple workshop, an easy workshop, just talking about the dynamics that have changed in this quarantine. I'm going to share my experience. I'm welcoming you guys to share your experience in the chat. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting started. So just a couple general technical notes. You're more than welcome to comment in the chat at any time. Post your thoughts, your feelings, your reactions. There'll be a couple of times where I look to you guys in the chat to share with me and share your experience as I share mine. But I don't want you to feel forced to do this. It's not your responsibility. You're more than welcome to sit in the chat and be quiet and just kind of take in everything that you're seeing in front of you. But if you want to engage, please do. We have a variety of other different workshops on the Nest website, so please feel free to go on Nest, check in. If you want to talk about any of these issues in a single session with one of us, you're more than welcome to register through the website as well. And again, if you want to comment in the chat, but you're finding that YouTube won't let you, you do need to go in directly and comment, create an account through YouTube. So yeah, I just want to say hello to everybody commenting in the chat. Welcome back. If this is one of the newer or not your first workshop, I just want to say hi to everybody in the chat. So let's think about what a roommate is. What do we get out of roommates? And this just doesn't have to be the idea of, the college roommate, the post-grad roommate, someone you live with. This could be your spouse, this could be your partner, this could even be your children, right? It's people that you're cohabitating with, that you're sharing space with, and that, even more simply, you're living with. These are the people that you are sharing your day-to-day life. And so we get a lot out of that relationship. Kind of simply, we get someone who's there to pay rent. We've got someone who we can eat with, who we can share meals with. We've got someone to, take part of our load in our living experience. But most importantly, we get social support, right? That's something that a roommate, a spouse, a child, it's what they all offer. It's someone that's going to take on your load, take on your social load, and back you up. And this is a really key element of our roommate dynamics as COVID-19 has kind of occurred, is we have a much smaller general social circle, right? Our social circles have shrunk down. The people we see on a daily basis have really shrunk down, and we're seeing a lot more of our roommates. Our roommates are shifting from being one of our social support systems to one of our priority social supports. So they're the people that we're predominantly seeing, that we're predominantly spending our time with. And that can put a lot of pressure on those relationships, right? That's not a guarantee that because we're spending so much time with them that these relationships are going to get stronger. In fact, for some people they've noticed, and I certainly experienced this myself, that these relationships may actually struggle a little bit with this greatly enhanced time spent together. You're spending so much time with your roommate, you're so engaged in that relationship that it actually might put a little bit more pressure on us. And that's hard because it's clinically proven that having a strong social support system is a key correlate with lower levels of anxiety and lower levels of depression and higher levels of self-satisfaction. So when we're happy with our social environment, when we're happy with the people that we spend time with, we feel better about ourselves, we feel calmer, and we feel more at peace. So when we're forced into what I've defined for this work group as a micro-social environment, the people that we're living with have shrunk down considerably. It's a much smaller social world. The scope of our daily relationships are smaller, and the pressure put on those individual relationships is a lot bigger. And for a lot of people, they've noticed that this has brought about conflict. They don't feel the same sort of comfort from their roommates, from their housemates, from their partners, and they're developing tension because of just the sheer amount of time spent. And that's totally natural. That's totally acceptable, especially when, Toylin, as you said, the space is small, right? You're kind of getting on each other's toes, standing on top of each other. That's natural. And there are actually things that, I did in my own personal relationships These aren't, put in a lab strategies. These are just things that I tried to implement when I was living with my roommate, who I had been living with for a year, but suddenly we were spending all of our time together and the pressures were starting to mount. There are just a couple easy steps that you can do to kind of challenge those relationships, restructure them, and actually eliminate a little bit of that tension. So, how is, I think, a good place to start is just think, how has this quarantine made us feel about ourselves, right? Not even about our relationships, but just us. I know for me, it may have made me feel more on edge, more uncomfortable, more afraid. Feel free to, comment in the chat how this relationship has really made you feel personally, how this quarantine has made you feel, being at home every day, having that limited kind of dynamic. Because again, for me, I've heard, yeah, exactly, Toyland, constrained, cranky. Um, I talked to a lot of people who've said that they felt lethargic, they felt held in. And so we ourselves are under a lot of pressure every day. We're feeling a lot of negative emotions. And so just think about how these new difficult negative emotions might lead us to feel about this micro social environment that we're talking about here, these individual relationships that we're experiencing. It's easy to feel, exactly as you said, impatient, or as you said, Joe, there's absolutely no quiet time. You're constantly surrounded by other people. It might make you feel almost confrontational, right? You feel negative about yourself, you feel anxious, unsure, and then you may kind of bring this out into your social dynamic. It might come out in an argument with a roommate. There's so many new pressures, and there's really nowhere to let them out because our new social dynamics are so constrained, they're so much smaller, they're so reduced. And because of that, it's totally normal and it's completely acceptable to get into it and spend some more time clashing with your roommates, right? That's understandable and that's normal. Not only is confrontation something that's natural for a roommate or for a roommate dynamic or for any kind of relationship, but also confrontation is just normal in life, right? We're constantly going to feel, triggered or frustrated by the things around us and let that out. But it's important to realize that these same things that we're experiencing, these same critical, negative feelings, this anxiety, this tension, these same things that we are experiencing, our roommates are experiencing as well. That same amount of tension, they're also feeling it. So we may feel, they're not respecting my boundaries, they're putting me under pressure, and they are feeling the same thing. They're experiencing the same amount of struggle, the same amount of strife, and the same amount of conflict. So if we were to kind of pivot in our thinking, pivot in our confrontational style, and think, it's not quite us that are constantly the victim, that are constantly under strife from our roommate, but both of us that are struggling in this situation, then we might be able to relieve some of those pressures, easing off a little bit of how we feel personally and kind of giving in more about how the group feels, how each of us as roommates feel in the situation. And a lot of this comes from the idea of a social contract. So every relationship that we have involves a social contract. It's the boundaries that you set with the people that you live with the people that you have relationships with. Every relationship has one. Each of them is dynamic and unique, but they all center around the rights that you feel you have within that relationship and the right that the other person in that relationship feels that they have. But it's been proven that when situations dynamically change, these contracts need to be redesigned. So these boundaries that we have with our roommates, that we have with our partners, that we even have with our children, they need to be redesigned so that the boundaries can be reestablished and the dynamic can grow and change based on the current time that we're living in. And I think COVID-19 and this quarantine is a very strong example of a time when this contract needs to be redesigned. And so the philosopher Thomas Hobbes originally, designed this concept to work regarding countries, but I think it works very well within the micro social relationships that we are feeling. At this high pressure situation, everyone needs their own amount of care and their own personalized care. And it's important to kind of talk to your partner, talk to your roommate, and see if you can find a way for both of you to redefine this relationship and change the way you two are interacting during this quarantine, to kind of reestablish the boundaries, reestablish your rights within the relationship, and move forward from there. Because it's easy to assume that things can stay the same and everything will be fine, but that's not always the case. The things that you may need, the care that you may need from your roommate, from your partner, may dramatically change during COVID-19, during this quarantine. And that's totally understandable. The whole world has changed in a way. And so there's this new responsibility put on you and a new responsibility put on your roommate to respect each other's new needs. These needs might not be the same as they were before, and you really can't expect your roommate or your partner to implicitly know the boundaries of this relationship. We really need to focus in this time on communicating and vocally out loud changing that social contract. And the first way to do that is to redefine and relearn what your needs are and what the things that you need from this relationship. And it's important to think about 5 things that are most important to you in your living space. And I'm going to challenge you guys right now, if you're comfortable, to actually write those down. Take a few minutes, I'll do the same thing, and write down those 5 most critical needs and send them in the chat. You don't have to do this. You're more than welcome to write them down on a piece of paper, but I just want to challenge you guys to kind of actually put those 5 needs down in writing so that you know them yourself. Because you may think you know them, you may think that they're kind of just implicit understanding, but actually having them and knowing them and them being in concrete can really make you feel more in control. So just for a few minutes, write down on a piece of paper or in the chat the 5 things that you value the most in your roommate relationship, in your partner relationship, what you think you need in this time. Okay. I know for me personally, a few of my most important ones are peace and quiet and some cleanliness, right? I think in this time, being able to be alone is so valuable, and being able to be respected while you're alone is really, really important. And then also a clean living space. Joe, I love yours, alone time and quality family time. The duality of that dynamic is really important, right? And it adds stages to the day. So you're not just alone and you're not just with your family. You actually get to make that switch. You get to make that pivot throughout the day. I think that's really, really critical and really important. And then, of course, exercise, right? You need the space and you need the room to do something like that. Making sure those boundaries are known. It's 2 o'clock. I'm going to exercise now. I need the living room. And I need you guys to respect the fact that I need to take this space. I need to work in this space. I think that's super important. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, I think, Toyland, this is an excellent, example of you needing things from your partner. You kind of took the words right out of my mouth, but the main things that you're getting from making this list is pushing you and your partner, you and your roommate's relationship to actually set down some rules. I know for me, with my roommates in college, with my roommates post-grad, I never really made critically defined rules, and that's really important. That's super key to know what the boundaries of the space are, what is allowed and what's not. And if for you, your partner doing more around the house, that's very important that they know that, because they may be super happy to do it, but putting it in writing and sharing it with them makes it all the more important, makes it all the more real, right? Now it's no longer just an idea or a pet peeve in your head, but it's something that's, put in writing, it's solid, it's real, because you've created it in a way. And while you're doing this, even outside of your workshop, if you want to take time to really write down these 5 rules, these 5 boundaries for your relationship, you can make it as fun as you want. You can make it an arts and crafts project. I've been in living situations, where we kind of have a big thing on the wall with it very elegantly put together, a very beautiful house rules list. This can be fun, this can be engaging, this can be something to do during quarantine, but actually writing down your needs makes them concrete and makes them real. But this social contract, it isn't anything unless it's both of you engaging in it, right? So now push your roommate. Ask them to do the same thing. Ask them to put down their 5 most important needs and then come together and share. Make it something of a collaborative process. So you're sharing and they're sharing, and you'll actually find that maybe a lot of your needs really complement their needs. Maybe they need alone time too. Or Toyland, maybe your partner has really been looking forward to taking more walks as well. Just taking those opportunities to share those needs fosters a really good sense of immediate communication, right? You're sharing and you're being very honest. And not only are both of you being honest, but you have these concrete pieces of paper that define and really clarify what both of you need in this difficult time. I think there are few things as positive for a relationship as just being straightforward and sharing what the boundaries are. But in order for this to be fostered well, you need to make sure that there's an environment of forgiveness when you're sharing these boundaries, when you're sharing these rules. Make sure that these are boundaries, these are guidelines, but there's not going to be punishment if they're not necessarily followed. This is the two of you coming together to share what both of you need and learning more about each other. Now, if one of you makes a mistake and messes up, you should be prepared and they should be prepared to forgive and accept and move on and develop something stronger and moving from there. And once you've kind of defined these rules and you've redefined your social contract, it's time to put that into action. Don't just write these down and kind of move on. Write them down, set up that meeting, like you said, Toylin, share with each other, and then move from there. Make sure you clarify and you define these rules, but then put them into action. And this can be a great way of giving your days more purpose during quarantine as well. Take a moment to go out and take that walk. Exercise. If you're saying that you need it in your guidelines and your boundaries, make sure that you're actually putting that into action. And if you find after doing it for a week that it's no longer necessary, that it's that it's no longer useful, then come back together and have another meeting and share your new boundaries, your new guidelines. Because of, the kind of instability of this COVID-19 situation, things are constantly going to change. The things that we need are going to change. And make sure that, your concerns about the coronavirus are incorporated into these rules as well. So if you want to make sure that your roommate is being cleanly, that your roommate is wearing a mask, social distancing, make sure they know that. Make sure that you feel safe in your home environment, because that's only going to make the relationship stronger and make it, you feel safer in your home. And since we talked about earlier, this is a micro-social environment. It's a much smaller social dynamic. It's really important that you feel safe and that you feel comfortable within this dynamic, within this conversation, and within the home. Because if we don't have that support at home, all of the other factors outside of us are going to be so much more pressuring, so much more hard if we don't have that one-on-one support, if we don't have that, support from the person that is closest to us. So set up several meetings, take moments to update these rules and change these guidelines. And this is an ever-evolving contract. It's an agreement between the two of you that these are my rules, these are my boundaries, these are my guidelines. I want to hear yours. I want to know your needs, and I want the two of us to grow from here. But also it's important, and I've seen a lot of you guys bring it up in the chat, but it's important to give yourself space within the home. So you've made this list of rules, this list of boundaries, this list of needs, but make sure that you're not dominating the amount of time that you spend with that person. Social psychologists have been proving for years that over spending time with someone only weakens the relationship. Spending 24 hours a day with someone 7 days a week can be exhausting. And by giving some space for yourself can make you kinder, more compassionate, and more engaged in that relationship. Stepping away for a few hours, even if it's just for a run, to watch a video by yourself, to meditate, taking that time for you and to spend it within yourself is super important for that relationship. And this can be for 15 minutes, it can be for an hour, it can be for whatever you need and what you and your partner agree on. But a little bit of space is super important. And from there, make sure that you and your roommate are also taking some time to do more than just cohabitate, right? Make sure that you're having new activities that you're doing every day to make the days dynamic. It's going to make your relationship feel all the more complex if you have consistent, new, and unique elements to your relationship. So watching TV, watching a movie, going on a hike, making sure that you're doing new things with your partner that they feel comfortable with, partner, roommate, children, will make the dynamic fresh and it will continually reestablish that social bond that you have. And that's super important. So yeah, just to kind of recap what we've talked about today before we move into a little bit more of a discussion is that the best way that I've found to strive in a quarantine cohabitation situation is to make a strong and consistently evolving social contract with your roommate, with your partner, or even with your kids if you want to, setting your needs and boundaries and making sure that they're heard and that they're understood, and then making sure that you yourself have the time to be alone, to be outside of those social dynamics, to give them even more meaning. I think these are kind of the three most crucial elements to having a positive quarantine relationship, having a positive roommate dynamic, is making sure that you feel comfortable, your partner feels comfortable, you feel that your needs are heard, and that you make sure that that relationship is ever evolving. So a little bit of homework, I don't want you guys to think of this as an assignment, but I just want to push you to do this, is to take a moment for an arts and crafts project. Spend 10-15 minutes and make that list of your 5 important needs. Toy Lynn and Joe, thank you so much for sharing in the chat about what your 5 most important needs are during this quarantine. But push yourself and push your partner to put those in writing and share them with each other. Make that conversation happen. It may seem awkward at first. It was very awkward for me at first. But once you kind of get into that dynamic and you get into that conversation, it will only strengthen the relationship to build that communication and build that sharing element and kind of go from there, right? It's a very simple thing. It's no guarantee that this is going to solve every single roommate crisis, but it fosters a little bit more of a spirit of conversation, And then when these boundaries are crossed, when you feel uncomfortable in this relationship, you can step back and you have something to refer to, right? We agreed on these dynamics, we agreed on these rules. Can we kind of come back to that and renegotiate, see where we went wrong, see where we still need to build, and go from there? So yeah, thank you so much for attending today, everybody. I'm going to leave the chat open. I'm going to leave the stream open for the last 5 minutes or so. If you guys have any comments, if you want to share any of your experiences, you're more than welcome to. But thank you for attending today. Be sure to check out any more workshops on nesthealth.io, and I'll see you next time.